Welcome to our conversation surrounding the protests here. We are live on Citizen Television and live on X Spaces as well. We'll be opening up the mic on X in a moment, so just raise your hand. Just a quick reminder about the rules of the game. We want you to keep it short, maybe a minute or two max, so we can get as many of you in as possible with my guests. Once again, Mercy Tarus, Kasmo Makore, and Wanjiru Wanjira. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us. So let's take it forward from where we left it. And I'd like to begin with you, Kasmo. So you contend that the protests continue because Ruto must go.
Yes.
What next after that? Or have you, thought through the next steps after that?
Absolutely. I doubt we need to have a very clear picture of what is happening or what is to happen after this clarion call has happened. Because remember, there are two schools of thought. There are people who think that when we say Ruto must go, we're calling for anarchy, which is not the case. He has shown us time without number that he has hired not on merit or competence, but on incompetence and people who are linked to grafts. I've yet to see a person who's had a clean history in the hiring process of the president. And we do not need to know what the next steps are. What we know is that this thing is paining us. What we know is that while they're able to apparently crack a serial killer's case in a matter of hours, killer cops are still walking freely in the CBD despite us giving numerous evidence. It's still, it's indubitable that this current government has shown us that we're the ones who are supposed to sort out the audit public debt. We're the ones who are supposed to figure out where the abductees have been taken. And one of our friends has been taken, so free Polo Kimani, first of all. And three, we are the ones, when they shoot at us, instead of them providing aid, we still have to escort the bodies. So they've shown us that they're not interested in governing us. So what we are saying is that because you have refused for the system to work, now let us work it the best way we know how.
Okay, let me just talk about, so constitutionally,
right,
if the president leaves office in the middle of his term,
yes,
the deputy president carries on to the end of the term. Is that something you have thought about if Ruto must go? I can see.
But you started your question with a very important line, constitutionally. There is nothing constitutional about this current government, and as we've said time without number, abnormal behavior during abnormal times is normal behavior. We will figure it out when the time comes. If it means for us to call for a referendum,
okay,
so be it.
So the question is, are you then happy with the deputy president taking over, Wanjiru?
No, I'd like to come in there. Yeah. When we say Ruto must go, we mean the entire Ruto administration, the entire government system, the overhaul that we're talking about, because we've seen everything by the Ruto.
And so when you mean the entire government, just sort of paint that for us. So there's a president, there is his deputy, there's parliament, there is a speaker of both houses.
All of them. Because you remember when we were protesting against the finance bill, we were literally outside in CBD overseeing the voting process, saying we reject the finance bill. And the members of parliament voted yes. While we were outside, the audacity to disregard the sovereignty of the Kenyan people. And that is why people were like, you know what? We're just going to walk into that parliament and reclaim our sovereignty, because all of these people do not care about us. And why we are saying we are partyless, we are tribeless, we are leaderless, because we do not subscribe to party politics. Most members of parliament voted yes, because that was the position of the UDA party. We are saying, can we talk about real issues that affect us as Kenyan people? If this is not something Kenyans want, why must it be shoved down our throat? So we are saying a government that does not read from the same book that we read as young people of this country. There's a disconnect. And this is the way of life. I mean, I feel like we are like a budding flower, which is in its budding stage, that is being prevented by Ruto and Rigathi, who have actually hijacked our democratic institutions, the parliament of this country. Ruto and Rigathi have hijacked parliament by bribing members of parliament to do whatever it is that they want. The parliament is the people's institution. We vote our representatives in parliament to go there and represent us. And there's something very wrong with a system that narrows down to one person deciding for millions of Kenyans what is it that should happen in their lives. So I think that when we say Ruto must go, Ruto is the embodiment of everything that is wrong with governance in our country, because the fish rots from the head. And we have seen this from the time he got into office. The other thing is our population, 80% of us did not vote in this administration. That is another thing we must not forget. And most people were just like, there's no point choosing between these two. We would rather not vote. But now I feel like we are more aware about why we must take part in politics, why we need to take our voters card early, why we need to vote our representatives, and why we need to have a say in who represents us. Because we have seen how costly it could be. We've seen us our country being auctioned to IMF with a bill that the land bill, the very dear land, we've seen measures that we do not agree with, being like the food, the agriculture. When we saw Bill Gates with Ruto, honestly, we were like, oh my gosh. And then the seed bill that was introduced. How can we not sell seeds to each other as Kenyan farmers, which has been our culture? So we are saying that we need to be allowed to usher in this new country we envision. Okay. This new country that respects and upholds the rule of law and human rights. Nobody should die for coming out to protest for good governance.
Okay. So Mercy, if what I hear, and maybe you can correct me just so we get an understanding. So Parliament needs to go. The executive, the cabinet has already been dissolved. We see what will happen with that going forward. So Parliament is out. You're saying the executive would be out, county governments. So, I mean, I think so what happens if we rout out everybody? Then what? Do we go to an election? Do we follow the Constitution? Because as I understand it, you're saying, the Constitution is what you are fighting for, right? And it's full implementation. So all of that has that procedure. So if, the president is not there, the deputy president takes over. If that does not happen, then it's the speaker for 60 days, after which there's an election. Is that where you foresee this going? If you're saying everybody must go? I mean, I think people just want to understand where this goes from here.
According to me, I think the president must accept that this government has failed. And by firing all the CSs, that means you have seen that all sectors are not working. And when we say what next, it is not, you see, what they're trying to do is tell us, you see, if you do this, then it's a black hole. There's nothing that you guys can do. We are going to go into anarchy. And someone said something very profound on X. They said, when they want to tax us, they compare us to Singapore. When we ask for accountability, they compare us to Sudan. And so when we say even the parliament must go, we mean that they have lost legitimacy. They do not represent the will of the people. They do not represent, they do not have our best interests at heart. So when they go there, they decide what they want, what benefits them, and it's not about us. It's no longer about the citizen. It is no longer about the Kenyan person. So the Constitution has provided everything that we need moving forward. It is not that we are going to go into a black hole. Okay. It is not like that.
Do you foresee an election? Is that where you think it's going, Casmo?
I think we foresee good governance first. And I think it's an unfair question for the country to ask if we're still losing 2 billion in a day. It is a very unfair, it's the same way I could still ask this government, why are children going hungry every single day they go to school? What next with the corrupt governors? What next with the people who consistently have cases of graft and rape and killings, who are walking free in the corridors of power? What next with them? Because that's what we are protesting against. And it is an unfair question for the youth population to be asked what next if we cannot hold these people to account. We have had the DCI page consistently come up with all sorts of writings, while we know people who have active cases not being anything, nothing happening to them, while we are being asked as the people who've said we are disgruntled by the amount of corruption, by the amount of death, by the amount of debt, by the amount of hunger in this country. I think it is an unfair question for us to ask. So what we are saying is, We want this issue of corruption sorted out first, because that is possible to sort out without going into another election.
Okay, but you want everybody out?
Yes.
So then how is the corruption sorted?
You do realize that the people who are perpetrating this corruption are the same people that are in office. Because when we were occupying, you saw the protests were organic and they were everywhere. We have been accused of being funded by the Ford Foundation. I have not worked for the past 2 months just for putting the interests of the country ahead. So while they look at it and they think it is such a great inconvenience, it is such a great inconvenience to me as well that my sister cannot afford university education. Lucky for her that she's already privileged, she's already joined. There are people who can no longer join university because of how expensive education has become. There are people who are going to miss out on jobs because they cannot find certificates of good conduct because they are exorbitant. People want them to pay bribes. There are people who will not be able to travel to go and change their lives, whether it's education, who cannot get passports. There are people who will not get identity cards, and therefore their lives are being delayed. So why don't we ask these questions to the people who are looting our future? Because what we are doing when we say Ruto must go, we are just shedding a light and we are pointing a mirror at him and saying, Mr. President, this is what you're giving us and it's not working for us. He is so obsessed with the destruction of property such that when he comes after the police force has killed over 40 people, he takes 11 minutes for him to first condole with us, obsessing over property. What are you doing about the people who are stealing from our future? That's part of what we're interested in knowing. Before we figure out what next steps are, we want this current generation, this current crop of leaders to tell us what it is that they're doing for us currently. Because as it stands, it does not serve us. It does not serve the people that the sovereign people of Kenya. It does not serve us. So we'd rather not have a system at all because the system we have currently does not work for us.
Okay, Wanjiru, a quick one before we take a break and go to X Spaces. If Ruto leaves tomorrow,
yeah, oh my, that made me so happy to imagine.
Yeah.
And then what would we do?
If Ruto leaves tomorrow, there's this narrative that there's going to be a leadership vacuum. First of all, there's no leadership at all in this country, so there's not going to be a major difference. And the Constitution of Kenya, Article 1, says that all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya. So what leadership vacuum? What we need to do is consolidate the gains we have made as a movement since we began as young people, and take back our country word by word, constituency by constituency. We need to start having people's assemblies at those wards so we can craft a path for alternative political leadership. People who we know from the community level, who we can hold accountable at any given time, and who share in our vision for a new Kenya. That's the only way we move forward best. We consolidate at the grassroots level, at that basic ward level, hold probably monthly community assemblies where we're discussing our issues, we're discussing governance, we're discussing whatever bill is being tabled at Parliament. We must continue to be vigilant about what's happening in the country. And this is one thing the movement has given us. We are very, very vigilant about what's going on. But now, can we bring the other people who are not on social media up to speed? Can we have, there's something we really celebrate at the social justice movement, which is collective intellect. Can we have everybody bring in the ideas about how to take Kenya forward at that basic community level? This traditional community has been celebrating academic progress, PhD levels. We have seen David Ndii, as an economist, has completely failed the country, so we don't go that path. We need to see how patriotism really drives us